All right, guys. I want to go over some of the tools that we had looked at last week and last class. Um, so to start with Illustrator, to set up the new file, um, we go to create new file, and for this project, we're going to set it up as 7 by 7 inches. Um, the number of artboards, you guys have 5. And then you want to create your bleed for the so this way, if you have anything, if you're going to have a black background, remember how important it is to extend that black background to the red line for the bleed to account for any kind of shifting. All right, so then we create, and then you'll see here the white edge of the border is the actual artboard of the design that will be printed and trimmed to. And then if you have a black border, you bring it all the way to the red line. All right. So now the importance of the bleed, as you remember, is in case of any shifting, you also need to include a interior safe margin um, to account for that shifting as well. So to do that, we come to our rectangle tool here, and then just click anywhere on the screen, and then we're going to type in 6.75 by 6.75. Now we need to put this directly in the middle of the artboard. All right, so instead of trying to eyeball it or anything else, up on top you have this shape here that says align to selection is the default. We're going to select align to artboard. So once that's selected and we have an item selected, you'll see these options here um, to align to the artboard itself. So we want to center both horizontally and vertical. All right. Now we need to do that for the other 4 artboards. You could copy over and do the exact same thing 4 more times, or you can hit Command X to cut this, and then hold Option Command Shift and hit V, and it will paste it on all of the artboards you have open. All right. Now we want to convert these to a guide, so this way they don't print. So you select everything and hit Command 5, and now you have your interior safe margins all set. Now when it comes time to saving, um, like I said before, you can save it as an AI file. You can save it as a EPS. It's totally up to you. I personally prefer to keep everything as a PDF. So this way, when it comes time to print, I only have one file. I don't need to like resave it. All right. So then we can name it something, whatever you want to remember what that file is. I would like you to also label the project as your name when you upload it later when this project is due. Okay. All right. So we hit save, and then we go into this box here, and you need to select marks and bleeds, and select trim marks, and then make sure you have use document bleed settings checked off. So hit save, and now we're good. So if we were to look at this file um, over here, and you can see the file has the trim marks all set up for you automatically. So this way, if we were setting this to be printed and you were printing it out and handing in the class, you would have those and you'd be able to lay down your straight edge and have a nice even straight cut. Okay. Um, Next, we went over the type tool and how there are different ways to insert text. So the first way was simply just clicking on a screen and typing out on a line. The next way was to click and drag to create a text box. And this you would use for when you were going to have a body of text, right? And this, you would use this if you wanted to have just a line of text or a word or even just one letter. Because the advantage is you have this bounding box that shows up around your type, right? You can rotate, you can increase the size by just clicking on the corners, right? And when you do that, make sure that you hold shift. Otherwise, if you don't, it becomes distorted, all right? When you have a text box and you increase the size, it does not affect the text. It only affects the text box itself, all right? The text stays as is. Even if you were to rotate, it rotates the text box, not the text. All right. So if you did want to change the size of the type, you would go into your type tool, change the size that way. If you wanted to rotate it, you would use the rotate tool here. All right. So there are ways to still alter the way the text looks, but if you're quickly trying to figure out and move things around in your layout, you want to use this method if you're using just that single line of text or a word. Now, if you didn't put your text into a text box and you just simply clicked, you can see it just runs off out into nowhere. All right. Okay, so now outlining the typeface, which is what you guys have all been doing for the project and for the homework. You have your text selected, and this here you can still click and change the type, but once you convert to an outline, you will not be able to do that, all right, because then it makes it into a vector art form. So now select the text with a black arrow and hit Command-Shift-O, and then it rips out the ability to change it as type and makes it into an outline. It allows you to then grab parts of the letter to adjust and change basically how those letter forms are working. The other thing you can do too is toggle your screen mode and hit Command Y, and you can see the difference with how rich type sits here, and you can see that it's still all black, and then this type is all outlined. So that's a good way of looking to see if your type is still capable of changing the typeface or spelling or whatever it is, or if you're able to adjust the characteristics of each individual glyph. All right. All right. So now the different tools that you have. You have the black arrow tool, which will select basically everything on the screen. The white arrow tool will select just individual anchor points, and not only that, but also adjust the Bezier curves right here. So you have anchor point here, and this curve is called a Bezier curve, and you adjust the curve by adjusting the handles. All right. Then if you hold on to the white arrow, you have a group selection tool. This here will select one full item within a group. So it helps because I don't want to ungroup this because I like to be able to move it around in the screen and adjust it, but I want to select just the letters itself at one at a time. So I can then go in and use just the white arrow and do whatever I need to do, but then it remains in a group for you. All right. All right, so now the Pathfinder tool, which is right here. All right, so now that we have our type outlined, we can change and alter even further by drawing lines over the type, selecting the lines, and then hitting divide. And then after you hit any Pathfinder, you want to ungroup. So Command-Shift-G to ungroup. And then you can move the items around. You could have also kept everything grouped and then used the white arrow to move items around. Some of you had issues with being able to select just items or sections of the item. You have to make sure you click anywhere off the screen to deselect something before you can go in and select just parts of that letter. All right. There are other items in the Pathfinder that's useful as well. You can, the top is to unite. So if I was to have all of these overlapping one another and I wanted to make this all into one. So if I hit Command Y, you can see everything as individual letters still. If I select everything in the top left, hit unite, now you see all the letters are joined together. You can also say create a case where you want to knock out something from the top. So if we have this square and I bring this on top and I want to be able to see through this square, so this way whatever's underneath that you can see, you select everything, and the second option, if you just hover over, it tells you what it's going to do. So minus front, and now that's knocked off, and you can see that you know, in this case, whatever you put behind it would come through the actual design. All right. Then we went over already did that. So then the pen tool. All right, so the pen tool, where's my pen tool, is used by clicking individual anchor points and connecting them by creating the Bezier curves. All right, or simply making something even straighter, whatever shape you want. All right, so basically it's the same thing that we talked about. You know, every item in Illustrator has the anchor points, and if it's a curve, then you know it's going to have these handles. If it doesn't have a curve, then it'll be just a straight shot. If you wanted to alter these, of course you can use the white arrow, but if you're using the pen tool, you can then just hold on to your command key and it will change the arrow for you. So instead of having to go back to the toolbar, you can just hold on to the command key and then keep drawing with the pen tool. All right. Then when you click on an anchor point, if you hold on to the option key, it pulls up this tool right here that can alter the anchor point further. Right. So say that we wanted to get rid of this Bezier curve. If we just click this with this tool, it removes the curve from that point. All right. But then if we wanted to add a curve, then we click and drag, and you can see now we have a curve on that anchor point. Okay. So this way, those two keys are helpful when you're using the pen tool and trying to fine tune the shape that you're creating. All right, so now adding text even further. So, you know, obviously just clicking on the screen, typing out, you had that option. Clicking and dragging, you had that option with a text box. We can even type on this path right here, right? So when we go to the type tool, you can see the type tool right now has a square shape around the type icon. And then when I hover over the line tool, the shape of that now shows a little line going through the type tool. That tells me that once I click, I'm now going to be typing on this path. So you can click, and then you have your type running on this path. When you select a black arrow and you see your type sitting here on this path, you have three lines. You have the beginning line, which you can start and move the beginning of the type around. You have an end, if you wanted to stop at a certain point. And then you have a middle one that allows you to flip between each side of that line. And that's going to come in useful in 1 second after I go through this next option here. All right, so now we have this other shape that we created, and same thing. If you look at the type tool, we have a square around the type icon. When we hover over, the icon changes into a circle. So that tells you you're going to be typing inside an object. So now the text sits inside that shape. All right. Now, as long as the shape is all the way around and connected, you'll be able to do that. If the shape, it looks like it's connected, and yet there's like a one little spot that's not closed, then it'll keep wanting to type on a line. So just make sure that whatever shape you're going to be selecting, it's completely closed. All right. So now, say we want to type on a circle. All right. And we don't want to type inside it. We actually want to type on the line. But every time we go to select the circle with the type tool, it's going to show us that we're going to be typing inside. So you have to hold on to the type tool and then select type on the path. And then when you click, now the text goes around. Now, just like with here, how you had those options to change the direction for what side that sat on, that is when this comes in handy, because now we want it to be on the inside of this circle rather than on the outside. So that jumps back and forth between the two. All right. Okay. Now to look at the type options itself. So in Illustrator, you have your character and your style and the size sitting up here. You could also go to your character dialog box here. So you have your type family, you have the style, and then you have the size. And then down below that, you have your tracking that moves the spacing in between each line. And then to the left of that is the kerning, which all of you have been given that second homework assignment to get that proper kerning for those 10 words. And when you place a cursor in between each letter, that's when you can change just the spacing between those letters. Then you have leading. Up here on the top right, this here would change the leading of the text, the space in between each line in a paragraph. So remember, I explained how, when you have a certain amount of line of text going across a page, you'd have to adjust the leading. Ideally, you want to have a comfortable width of characters per line, and then the default, or rather the optimal leading for that line of text will be 120% of whatever the type size is. All right. Once you go beyond that, then you need to increase the leading, which is why when you do term papers and the text goes all the way across the page, you want to double space, so this way it's easier for the eye to track back to where it should be going to the next line. Okay. All right, that was what we went over for the first day. Now let's quickly move on to day 2 of what we went over. The artboard tool. This is useful, so say you're designing something and you're like, all right, I want to do something different with this design, but I don't want to get rid of the design I'm currently working on. You could select everything, hold Option, and drag and drop it into the gray area for later use or reference. Or if you want to actually have 2 separate designs of one word, you could make a copy of the artboard. So the artboard tool is right here. With that selected, you can click on any artboard, and just like in any item, hold Option and drag, and then it makes a copy of both that, whatever was on that artboard, it makes a carbon copy of it for you. So then this way, you can adjust what it is that you're working on and move on to a different design. All right. There are many times that, for this project, you ask for 5, and you would end up having, many artboards in your design. and you don't want to resave the file, say like, project one final, whatever it is, you want to have like just that one PDF file to worry about. So you could quickly have, you can see, say we had all this stuff, something on every single artboard, and I tell you, all right, I only want 2 of your designs. All right, so get rid of the other ones. You don't want to like delete the work that you've done on the other designs. You only want to hand in 2 of the artboards. So with the artboard, you can select the artboard and hit delete, and you can see that it doesn't delete any of the artwork that was in there. It just gets rid of the artboard. So then when we hit save, and then we look at that file, which disappeared, here it is, you can see now it's just those 2 is going to show up in your final design. But when you open up the file in Illustrator, you still have everything that you worked on. All right, so I definitely recommend doing this so that way you don't end up losing anything that you've worked on. All right, let's see. Now, there are times that you want to change the capitalization of your type. Up here, you go up to type, you go down to change case, and you have these different options to go from all caps to all lowercase, and then you have title case, and then sentence case. All right. For me, I've had many times where I've had a client send me a Word document and they just left the caps on, or they just love how all caps look. And there's no way back when you'd want to have to like retype everything out. In this case, you bring it into Illustrator, and then you quickly allow Illustrator to change and put things back into the proper capitalization for you of what you'd want. All right, then strokes for the type. Now, with the color of something, say we had this text and it's yellow against white, difficult to read, and we want to add a stroke to this type. Now, there's a couple ways that you would end up doing it. You could, if you were to simply add a stroke to this, and then you go to your strokes, you can see how when you increase the stroke, it closes in on your type. So that's terrible. You can't have that. Otherwise, it's impossible to read. All right. So what we need to do is not have a stroke right now on this type, but make a copy of the typeface of the word, put it behind the word, and then add a stroke to that. So you have 2 texts directly on top of one another, and one has no stroke, so this way it stays nice and clean, and the one behind it has the stroke. So we'll select the text, and we hit Command-C to copy, and then with the text still selected, we want to paste behind that text. So we hit Command-B to paste behind. So now when we add a stroke to that, and we increase the size of that stroke, it doesn't affect the text that was on top. All right, so this way you can see there's 2 different text boxes, and that's the proper way to add a stroke to type. Another way is converting it to an outline and then adding the stroke to that. Then in here, as you increase, it still closes in on itself. But once it's converted to outline, you can see down here, this option opens up for you. So we can align the stroke to the outside to push the stroke so it doesn't close in on itself. All right. Now, that's a lot easier, absolutely, but there's disadvantages to it that way. I mean, say now we decided, oh, we need to change the kerning over here between the E and the S. The first method, that still allows that to happen because it's still type. Okay? The other way, you cannot. Here we go, 0. This way it does not have that option. So we would end up having to, select the group and then move it manually with the arrow key. So there's definitely advantages and disadvantages for going both way. And at the end, it's going to be the same. So it's whatever you are more comfortable working with. All right. Then we went over how to create masks. So say we want to have a design in a way that's only showed part of the text. So let's see, do an A, put it over our text, and then you hit Command 7, and it will create whatever the item on the top was as a mask. If we hit Command Y, you can see all the text is still there, but the mask is only showing what was inside. All right. You can also do it to shapes. So if we wanted to have and only show some text that's inside, Command 7. All right. So that's a simple way of creating a mask and basically hiding everything on the outside of whatever that object was. There are many times when you want to create a mask where there were different objects. So say we wanted to create a mask using a shape like this. All right. And we went to our Pathfinder, we hit Unite, select, Command 7, you're good. Now, say we end up having different text, and we ungroup, and we wanted to have different type. That created some sort of shape, and we hit Unite. Let's release. To release the mask is selecting the object and hitting Command Option 7. Basically, Option is going to be something that you'll notice when I keep saying all these different key commands, how to toggle back to what it was before, all right, to go between. So like, all right, now we hit Command 7 and everything's working. There are many times that you'll go to do a mask, and especially with type, sometimes it won't happen for you. So then you have to go to Option and Compound Path. So once Compound Path is hit, then you'll be able to go and make that change. That is true in InDesign as well. So if you ever go to create a mask and nothing's showing up, then select your object, go to Object, Compound Path, Make, and then you'll be able to make that mask for you. Okay, then we looked at the filters. Let's get rid of this. Different ways of having filters, but not on that, on this. Okay. So up here, right next to the paragraph tab, we have the options of make with warp or make with mesh. All right. So the first one, the warp tool, will bring up these options that you can go through and see if something is going to work with what your idea is. Now, please, I mentioned how I want you to come up with the ideas and force the computer to do what it is that you want the type to do, that you want the design to look like, as opposed to just blindly creating some sort of filter effect and then allowing the computer to dictate your design. I'm all for using methods that make life easier, but I just want to make sure that you have a clear understanding of what you want the computer to do. So once you know that one of these is going to basically do what it is that you're looking for, then definitely use it. All right. All right. So this right here are the different ways of the different options rather for using the warped filter. All right. Then the other option is to use mesh. So now the mesh is going to basically drop a grid over your type. And in this case, the default is 4 rows by 4 columns. You can adjust that if you have a much longer word, or decrease it if you're only going to be using smaller grids. When that's selected and you use your white arrow tool, you can click inside the individual grids or the individual anchor points of each grid. All right. Now, when you do any kind of these filters, if we hit Command Y, it doesn't show the type, right? You can see here, like we can still see the text here. Right now it's only showing that this is a filtered object. So we need to basically solidify our choices if we want to adjust this text any further. So when that, you select the type, you go up to Object and hit Expand. And then you hit OK. Now if we hit Command Y, you can see our text is back, where we can then go ahead and adjust the type further if we need to. But until you hit Object Expand, then you don't have that ability to adjust any of that text. All right. Now the last thing we went over were brushes. All right. So my brushes right here. All right. So now, say I want to create something that is going to basically wave through, and I also wanted it to have some sort of filter on it. So I'm going to take this, and then I want to apply a filter on it, a warp, and then I also want to use it in a different design where it curves. So I think for the class I used this, and then I wanted to use this as basically a flower that can come off of something that was in the middle. So I want to have this sit in the middle, and now I want to have this text be on a curve coming off of the center. All right. So once I have this text set, I want to go up to Expand to solidify it, and then I want to drop it into the brush. And then there are different brushes. The scatter brush is if you were, say, have paint splatter everywhere, you want to have different objects thrown all over the screen. A pattern brush is if we were creating a border of some sort that we want to have whatever we created repeated over and over again. And then we have an art brush, which will take our design and let it sit just from beginning to end. It doesn't repeat it, but it will distort it. All right. So we hit OK. And then this changes the direction of where we would be drawing. So I would probably be clicking on the right, dragging to the left. So I want to start at the S and end with the J. So I want to flip it so it goes from this to this. Then we hit OK. And now if I create a line, I can go and select that object, and now that becomes another way of inserting text. And you can even adjust it just like any other brush. So if we select the path, we can adjust the way the word is looking. We can also change the size of the stroke, right? So if we increase the size, it just makes the text much larger. It doesn't push it off to the end. If we make it smaller, you can see it will still always begin here and end here. So if you want to make it smaller, you can see then it pulls back more into the proportion of what we had originally. All right, so that's another way that you can, bring in type to take on different characteristics for this project. All right, All right, that is all the tools that we went over. Hopefully, it's helpful for any of you that want to reference it. And all right, I'm out. Have a good day.